Hello everybody, Jardian here. Today I wanted to do a quick video covering the Ronin Katana RK1 entry-level sword. Now, this is just going to be some of my initial thoughts and impressions as another man by the name of Matthew Jensen, who just happens to be, in my opinion, the greatest sword reviewer on YouTube, has already made a very nice in-depth review of this sword. So, if you're interested in the sword, I really recommend watching his video. It's very thorough, really great review, and he includes destructive testing that I am not willing to do. So for this video, it's not as much a review of this sword as it is a discussion on the state of entry-level swords these days, and how these Ronin Katana blades fit in there. I wanted this to be more of a laid-back thing, which is why I'm trying out narration. Let me know what you guys think. I think it turned out pretty well, and it's definitely a lot easier on me than trying to record everything in the moment. You know, I can do the narration afterwards and get my thoughts together. In the background, you'll just see videos of the sword, me cutting some bottles, and me doing forms or otherwise just swinging it around. You know, it was pretty cool getting a feel for it. I'm not going to pretend that everything turned out amazing, although I got some cool footage in. But despite this being a new kind of video for me, I hope you guys enjoy. So, if this isn't going to be a thorough review, then why am I making a video? Well, I really just wanted to make one. It really bugs me whenever I can't put out content for a while. I have 2 videos that are very nearly done, but just little things keep me from finishing them, so I wanted to put this out. I had received this sword secondhand recently off of a member of the Sword Buyer's Guide forum, and I was so impressed that I thought I needed to get the word out about these Ronin Katana entry-level swords to those who might not know. Now, I had seen these swords many years ago, being in the sword community. However, I never really jumped on it, as when I started out, I would say that the go-to budget katanas were Musha. For $50 or $60, you could get a very acceptable, albeit very cheaply made, katana that you could cut bottles with, pool noodles, whatever you wanted. And honestly, the value is just amazing, so much so that I didn't feel the need to go up to the $140 mark to get another 1045 in the form of these Ronin Katanas. After all, by the time I finished my stage of using Mushas, I was already in what I would consider the mid-range of swords. That being Chines, I had a Ronin Katana before, just things like that, more of the $300 range, like my Hanwei XL Lite that I love, so I never really felt a need to go back and buy one of these entry-level swords. However, when I saw this appear secondhand for a really good price, I decided to jump on it and give it a fair shot, and I'm very glad I did. So I wanted to make this video kind of as a PSA that, in my opinion, these Ronin Katana entry-level cutters are the best entry-level katana someone can get. Now, as I said back in the day, it was absolutely Musha. Whenever somebody wanted to get into swords, katana specifically, I would always recommend a Musha. I'm a big proponent of people starting off with budget blades rather than going straight for the mid-range or higher. In some cases, it makes me angry when someone posts just saying, hey, I want my first katana, and people immediately recommend something many hundreds of dollars. I've seen people post that they're mad, like they wanted a katana because they played Sekiro, and they're really mad because now they have this $400 Hanwei and they hate it. When, you know, really, they just wanted a little cheap thing that is also usable. However, these days, as I looked up Musha, I was going to get one for my friend, I saw that these blades, which were once $50 or $60, are now easily $80 on some places, or much higher. I've seen Mushas going for disgusting prices. And at this point, I don't think it's competitive with something like this Ronin. Now, don't get me wrong, I love my Mushas. They let me get into swords when I was a teenager. I barely had any money. You know, and before I got my first Musha, I didn't even like Japanese swords. Back then, that was the HEMA boom. Everyone was into HEMA. Everything's, you know, there's all these YouTubers. And I thought Japanese swords, you know, I didn't even give them a try. But then one day I saw a Musha going for $40 on Amazon. I grabbed it, and the rest is history. So yeah, these super cheap but usable swords absolutely have their place. But that was back when it was competitive. Now, with the prices I'm seeing, I just don't see the point in grabbing a Musha anymore. I mean, compared to this Ronin, or any higher-end sword, the fittings are just rather poor. The Suka is blocky, and the Ito is almost always loose. Everything's glued together, and the blade just overall is clunky. It's okay for whacking pool noodles and bottles and just having fun with your sword, like I did for years, and I'm grateful for that. But for the price it's going, I don't think people should grab them. And now you might be able to see where I'm going with this. This Ronin Katana sword really gave me the inspiration to make this video because I was just thinking, as a first sword, nothing else in this range even compares. I honestly think that it handles better than a lot of my more expensive swords that I have. Sure, the fittings are alloy and the saya is very loose and rattly, but these are all things to expect within the price range. And despite the fact that I got this second hand and it was very used, the Suka Ito is still really tight. The diamonds are pretty even for such a cheap sword, and overall the shape is just really nice. One of the things I really liked about my Ronin Katana Kokatana that I returned was the Suka, and just the feeling in the hand, and this feels even better to me. This is a good time to talk about handling, and the first thing I noticed when I got this thing out of the box was how light it was. Or not just light, but very nimble and lively. Lively is a term you hear a lot in reviews, but I think people often get it confused. Just because something is heavy doesn't mean it feels dead, and just because something is light does not mean that it's lively. I have a Yamakami, which is a 3-pound sword, and indeed, that feels very dead. But on the other hand, I have my Oniyuri, which is the shorter tennis blade with a very long Suka and a thick Nakago. And despite the fact that overall I'd say it's pretty light and has a low point of balance, I would also not call it lively. There's just something about how the weight is in the handle that it doesn't want to move like some other swords do. All of this isn't to say that the Ronin Katana entry-level swords are the liveliest and best swords I've ever owned. But what I'm trying to bring attention to is the fact that I certainly own more expensive swords that feel worse in the hand. One of my hopes in recording this 10 minutes background footage of me swinging it around is that it kind of shows that handling and the fact that it's very easy to control, easy to stop, something I think that's great for a beginner. And I would say that that's one of the main issues that plagues cheap budget level swords is the handling. Companies think they can get by making cheap blocky Suka and stuff because, well, beginners probably won't know better. And again, if they're just whacking bottles or pool noodles, then they won't really care. You also have the other type of beginner who is influenced already by Koryu or the forums and stuff like that. And he says, well, no, I'm not going to be like that. I want a really nice handling sword for my first one. So they'll get recommended a super expensive Iaito or something, which could certainly be more money than they needed to spend. Especially then if they're like, well, maybe I did just want to try out backyard cutting and just have some fun. Well, no, now you spent a few hundred on an Iaito, which is really only going to be good for kata, which unless you're being formally trained, you might not even be that interested in. You know, maybe you just wanted a sword to swing around, but again, you didn't want something clunky. Well, that's where I really think that these Ronin entry-level swords excel. Similarly to even cheaper swords like Musha, these entry-level Ronin swords are cheap enough that you won't feel terrible if you beat them up or if something happens. You know, if you whack it into the stand and it takes a little set, it's not the end of the world. It was $100, $140 if you got it new. But unlike the Musha, nothing really feels cheap with these, barring the saya. The saya is as cheap as they come, which is just fine. People are going to ding them around. And also, unlike the Musha, these provide a bit more artistic value. I'm not saying it's the most beautiful blade in the world or that it's well polished, although you should definitely learn to polish yourself, and these swords are great for that. But because they have the real hamon, it's something that you can show to people or you can stare at, and it just gives you more to look at. It's something that isn't there with the cheaper swords. Before I forget, I should definitely talk about the cutting and performance. While again, I've already spoken the merits of the sword otherwise, it's also a pretty nice cutter. Now please keep in mind, I got this second hand, as I said. He cut with it a good bit, I believe, so I'm definitely not representing the factory edge. When I got it from him, it was pretty dull. I tried to fix it up with a strop before the cutting, but it only did so much. Now, generally 1045 is really nice to work with, especially for repairing damage like chips or rolls. You can fix it with a stone so fast compared to harder steel. But personally, I do have a lot of trouble putting a fine edge on it, especially compared to something like my Hanweis or my Chenis swords, which all use harder steel. I'm definitely not the world's best sharpener by any means, but with those swords I can get them paper cutting, even shaving sometimes, relatively easily with a strop. But with this, I was just going at it, and it's sharp, but I really couldn't get it shaving. So just keep that in mind. I really didn't do great at the cutting, but I still wanted to get something. You know, my fingers were freezing, but I still had fun whacking bottles with it, and I think someone starting out would have a great time. If anything, this kind of sword is really great for the development of your swordsmanship and cutting abilities. Personally, I love my Hanwei XL Lite to death. It is my favorite cutter and just sword to swing around. But hey, some people would actually say this kind of blade is cheating. You know, it and my Yamakami both have wide, specialized blades, which absolutely make it easier. But with these Ronin entry-level swords, the blade is definitely more traditionally proportioned, and it's something that gives you a lot of room to practice and improve with. I think these are perfect for a backyard cutter starting out. You can really develop your form, and you know that it's mostly you and not the sword. When you're using the very budget swords, you know, the Suka isn't right, the blade's kinda weird, you never know, is this the blade, would a more expensive blade be performing differently, or is it me? Well, with these swords, I think you can have the confidence that you have a nice handling, well-proportioned blade, and that it's mostly on you to improve. That's something I definitely value in a entry-level sword, and while my cuts weren't that great, it was my first time really cutting with it, I could definitely see somebody using this and developing some great cutting skills. Overall, definitely recommend it for a backyard cutter. Okay, this was supposed to be a short video, but the narration's been pretty fun, so I've gone on a long time. But let's try to wrap this up. Overall, what I'm trying to say about the sword is that the value is just incredible. The quality for the price just can't be beat. Again, I got it a bit cheaper than other people will, but you can get this for 140 new, or right now the sale's going on, the yearly scratch and dent, and it goes on for 100 plus 15 shipping. That is an absolute steal. Again, it's double what the old Mushas were, but if prices continue and most Mushas are still going for like 80, then going up an extra 30 bucks and getting this isn't even a question. I'm very glad to have it in my collection, and funny enough, it's the only normal katana I own. My Hanwei and Yamakami are both wide blade katanas, my Oniyuri has a shorter blade, and my main sword I practice with is my custom O-katana, and that is obviously a great deal bigger. So this just something feels right about swinging it. It's easy to move around and stop, it's very easy to draw, I can even draw it left-handed. As another plus, it's the only sword I own that has a red sai, it looks cool with my new blue outfit. Now, I think I've covered just about everything I wanted to say. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I had a great time making it. It was fun just setting up a camera, swinging a sword around. Probably more fun than cutting bottles for me at this point. Of course, I always wish that I could look cooler and that some of my draws would be less clumsy, but I think I got some cool ones in. It was nice just being out, and there was this red-tailed hawk screaming as I did my draws. I think he liked me. Definitely let me know if you enjoy this kind of content. I have some more videos on the way, just little stuff, and the blowgun review, which should hopefully be out relatively soon. Just little thing keeping me from putting it out. I really appreciate everybody who sticks with the channel even when I don't upload for months. It's just hard for me to think of videos sometimes. Anyway, hope you all have a good one. I will see you next time.